Welcome to Digital Marketing that puts people first, brought to you by the Online Co, where we believe the best way to help businesses grow is to do exactly that, put people first. I'm James Parnwell, and in this episode we have Shaun Alexander, a sales and marketing executive with over 15 years of experience launching and scaling Australian and international digital media, technology and entertainment businesses. Shaun's passion for marketing and advertising grew after completing award school in the early 2000s, where he discovered the power of creatively connecting brands with people. He spent the first part of his career working for media publishers during the second wave of the digital revolution and rose through the ranks to become the National Sales Director for Technology and Gaming Brands at CBS Interactive. Shaun then joined Pandora, a music streaming platform, as their first Australian commercial hire and introduced digital audio advertising into Australia. After the success of Pandora's Australian launch, Shaun was approached to head up SoundCloud for ANZ and open the first regional office in the region. He was head of growth for the ASX-listed music credits database Jackster and is now advising aged care tech platform Plus and working as Chief Commercial Officer for an Australian analytics startup called Insights. He's a long-standing member of the marketing committee at community broadcaster Northside Radio, where he's been presenting a music show since 2003. In addition, he co-hosts a monthly soul music show nationally on ABC Radio with Christine Arnoux. Shaun, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, James. It's great to be here.
So, back when you got started, why marketing? Did you fall into it or did you see something interesting there?
Look, I think a lot of people in marketing and in advertising tend to fall into it, but I was fascinated with marketing from an early age. I saw it as a natural application to creativity. Growing up, I was always wildly, had a wild imagination, and marketing really kind of seemed to give focus to that imagination. I was also fascinated by human behavior, really interested in why different people did the things that they did and acted in the way that they did. And I always found that successful marketing was based, almost 100% on empathy, sort of learning what's important to other people. But look, like I sort of mentioned, I did kind of fall into it. When I left university, I did a general degree and really had no idea what I wanted to do. So I fell into sales. But as you mentioned in the introduction, not long after, I did award school, which was the creative advertising course run by the Australian Writers and Art Directors Association. And that was really a sort of an aha moment for me. It was teaching people how to write ads, being either copywriters or art directors. But I remember in the opening keynote on the first day of the course, Simon Reynolds, which some of you may know, he was the advertising legend from the 80s and 90s, best known for creating the Grim Reaper AIDS commercial.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So that was one of his claims to fame. But he said in his keynote, he stood up, and the first thing he said, and this has always stuck with me, is if you want to be an artist, go and paint a picture. But if you want to be in advertising, then you need to learn to sell. And that was that real light bulb moment, because I had been in sales and really felt like a bit of a fish out of water in sales. I felt like I was a creative person trapped in a salesperson's body. And then when I sort of heard that and went through the course, I realized that you could do both. You could be creative, you could help market products, and you could also sell. And that became I didn't end up going down the copywriter agency route. I ended up working in media sales, working for publishers, because at the time, especially, it was sort of in the early days of digital, in the early 2000s, then there was the opportunity in media sales to use your creativity and your sales skills to really help brands and marketers connect, with their customers. And that was, to me, ticking a whole bunch of boxes. And from there, I sort of, learned the craft, really learned that craft of marketing, learned the craft of communication, learned the craft of early digital marketing.
Yeah, terrific. So you've hit on a few things there, and you talked about the creativity that marketing offers, but you've also talked about human behavior and empathy, and it's like there's a psychological component to marketing as well. So it's creativity in order to help people feel something, but then you're using technology as well, and it's a mashup of these three somewhat diverse skills.
Exactly, and to me, that's what's made it so interesting. It is that sort of, it's the sort of the art plus the science, but also, it sort of goes on to I guess my philosophy of marketing as well is your product or service should really exist, or your brand should exist to both help people and inspire them. And by helping them, you sort of asking the question, how does what I do make somebody's life easier?
Yes.
And also, how does it make them feel like they're part of something great? And that's the inspire part. So it has a sort of a practical element and also an emotional element. And I think if you can nail both of those, then you're onto something pretty good.
Yeah, so at the heart of any business or organization should be, a product or service that resolves a human problem.
Exactly right.
Whether that be, I need a PowerPoint in my wall, or or I need aged care. Like it's sort of everything. And I guess essentially what you're saying is that if you just need to explain how I'm going to make someone's life easier, but you want to inspire them as well, so make them feel like they're part of something bigger.
Yeah, exactly right. And look at an example of that, and this is sort of if I sort of hark back to my childhood when I first started getting that sort of love of marketing before I probably even knew what marketing was or what it meant. So when I was growing up in the showing my age here, when I was sort of growing up in the 1980s,
me too. It's all right.
I was really, as a teenager, I was really into skating, into skateboarding, and like all forms of youth culture, it's completely tribal. And the brands that sort of owned this space really knew that. So at the time, there was a brand that dominated skating back then called Powell Peralta. You might have heard of people like Tony Hawk. That was sort of one of the sponsored skaters under that sort of Powell Peralta umbrella. So what that brand did, they created this sort of brand of professional riders. This is well before the days of influencers, and they called it the Bones Brigade. And each of the members of the Bones Brigade, there was like 5 or 6 of them, had their people like Tony Hawk, Steve Caballero, Lance Mountain. They had their own, brands themselves. They had their own skateboard decks with their own graphics, their own T-shirt ranges, their own trainer ranges. And as 13-year-old kids that were sort of into it, we were inspired by that and wanted to emulate that. So that then not only practically, we bought the skateboards to make us better skaters on the helping side, but also that then made us feel part of that tribe, and it gave us a sense of identity. And the brands knew this, and they, really sort of nurtured that notion. And that philosophy has been sort of replicated by countless brands across not only youth culture, but in music and in sport and, any sort of product. Is people associate themselves with that sort of, activity, or that, defines them or makes them feel part of something. And then all of the brands within that ecosystem, become personally connected to that group of customers. And not only do they sort of serve to help, but they also create that sense of identity for the people that are needing that product or into that type of product.
Yeah, great. It's a terrific example, and really interesting to think about influencing marketing, like not only pre-social but pre-internet.
Yeah, well, like, as I said, it was showing my age. I'm sort of old enough to sort of know the world before the internet, right? And even though I've worked for the majority of my career in the internet and digital media, it's not too different in many instances. There was still, influencers, but they didn't just live on social media. They were people that were very good or passionate or ambassadors for the thing that they did, and they aligned themselves with brands. Back then, it was called sponsorship, and they became the voices of those brands' products, and they became ambassadors not only for those products but for those industries. And then that created that whole credibility chain
Yes.
that sort of resonated down to to the consumers.
I think when we talk about this philosophy of putting people first in marketing, which is precisely what you're talking about here, the idea that we as a digital as a digital species now somehow evolved new behaviors, when really an idea like influencer marketing has been around maybe for thousands of years. There's always been somebody doing something at the top of the pile influencing people. We're just applying it differently.
I just think we've lowered the barrier of entry. Barrier to
Yeah.
entry. Back in the past, in the sort of the examples that I sort of mentioned around sponsorship, you had to be, renowned to be at the top of your craft, and then you would, and then you would be of value to brands because you were marketable, right? Now it's the same philosophy, but there's just a lot more people competing in that space, and now the metric of I guess of suitability is the number of followers you might have on social media, because
Right.
you can reach things. So rather than it's like the influencers now control the reach; they become the media, whereas in the past, I guess what you would call sort of the influencers then were then utilized by media, by traditional media, be that magazines, TV, etc., because of the profile they had within that particular ecosystem.
Yeah, so there were big gatekeepers, so there's just less influencers.
Gatekeepers is exactly right, and you can see the same in in media. We're probably going off on a tangent here, but in content, one of the challenges in the in the social media age, or the sort of the Web 2.0 stage, is that everybody can have a a bit of a sort of a mouthpiece to an opinion, and and that creates all sorts of challenges from a social point of view. Whereas in the past, the gatekeepers were where you had to be employed as a journalist or a whatever expert in a particular field, and you needed a qualification.
Yes.
We're probably going to go down a rabbit hole here with
Yeah.
it.
Well, we could go down. Has the internet been good for society, and has social media? But that's
another
maybe
podcast right there.
topic for another for another day. I love that you used the word empathy before. Can you unpack that a little bit further, perhaps? I mean, really, empathy in marketing means I probably need to walk a mile in my customer's shoes in order to speak to them and understand them, in order to help them.
Exactly right, and it's exactly what it means. You need to understand what's important to your customers, and you can't just generalize, group everybody together. I also don't think you can just use, even though I'm a digital person, you can't just use data and digital analysis to get that information, because you miss so much when it's just a data point. Or even if you're doing something like surveys, you miss so much because you're missing the nuances. You're missing the to and the fro conversation. You're missing subtle changes in body language, visual hesitation, excitement, all of those human attributes that can tell you a lot more than words can. Or digital biases. What we do online isn't reflective of what we do in real life. There's a paradox there. And if you've ever done any market research and looked at survey results, for instance, people tend to, and it's just human nature, it's not even consciously, they tend to give the responses that they think you're wanting to hear.
Mm.
Whereas when you actually sit there and let people have a bit of a rant, it can all come out. And you can learn so much more. So to me, and I work, my current role is is a analytics platform that's sort of looking at data and trying to get insights out of it. For me, insights don't give you the answer. They tell you when there is a shift in data. So they tell you this is where you have to actually pay a bit of attention and dive a bit deeper. They're a signal. Data should be seen as a signal for you to investigate further.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things that attracted me into the digital side of marketing was the data. I love that I could match up what we did creatively, put it out there and see if it worked or not. But the flip side to that is what you're saying, that the data can be interpreted in all sorts of different ways and is missing layers of nuance.
Yeah, and I think that's, so I've been involved, my sort of background, my early part of my career was in that sort of digital sales, digital media sales space, where we've kind of gone from, simple contextual banner ads into, behavioral targeting, programmatic advertising, which, in many instances has become significantly more sophisticated and effective. But to your point, one of the real challenges that's created is we tend to rely on black boxes. And what I mean by that is that so much more of our marketing has become tactical, and it's become all about optimizing to a result. I want to get this many sales based on this cost, and I don't really care how I get there. Whereas what that's missing, and what that's at the sort of expense of, is the learnings as part of the journey. Is kind of going, well, I might have got here, but how did I get here? Why did this particular demographic all of a sudden interact with my messaging, whereas I was only targeting this demographic?
Yeah.
And then maybe you're missing a whole opportunity. You were targeting, women 25 to 45 for this campaign, but you're getting, in urban areas, but you're getting a lot of interest from men in regional areas. But you don't know that because you're going for the cheapest clicks or the cheapest sale. Whereas maybe there's this whole other market you just didn't know about because your strategy was, was missing some element. And, unless you kind of can pick apart the data and any of those sort of spikes in data or anomalies, then often it gets missed.
Well, you also talked about you're starting your career and as a child with your creativity. And as a marketer, you can start with creativity and you can end up in a very dry and arid data report.
Yeah.
And as an agency, for us is constantly going back to, well, who are the people? There's an actual person on the end of this ad that we've created or this blog that we've written or whatever it might be, engaging with this and who are they? Because you're quite right. You're getting out of the black box. You're saying, what else is happening here? What's the nuance? What's the human side to this? And possibly we're talking about empathy again.
Exactly right. That's why you've got to spend a significant amount of your time talking to your customers, talking to your potential customers, so those groups that the personas of people, the different groups that you think should be your customers, understanding, what's motivating them, why would they buy your product or service, why do they like competitors, why do they do the things that they do. That's going to help you not only with your marketing, but also your product market fit to, are you actually trying to sell something that people want? And then understanding, speaking to people that haven't bought your products, that your marketing isn't resonating with, rather than just relying purely on the data and the numbers. And there's a temptation to sort of completely live in the digital world just because it's so easy to automate now. But I'm a firm believer that you are missing a lot unless you're spending a lot of time, with customers. And that's probably because, I've had a fairly unorthodox career path. I didn't sort of study marketing at university and just have been in pure marketing roles my whole career. I started in sales and then went into sort of marketing, media sales, into marketing roles, etc. So I guess it's natural for me to be having conversations with people. That's why I think in
Yes.
organizations, sales and marketing should be working hand in hand.
I'd like your thoughts on sales and marketing because, I mean, in a sense, they're siblings. They work together. But in some organisations, you'll have a sales and marketing manager, right? It'll be the same person, and other people will say, "Hang on, these are separate functions. They should be separate." You have experience in both worlds. What's your thoughts on that?
Look, it depends on. I guess they definitely have to work closely together. I think depending on the structure of the organization, when you're a small organization, you tend to have, sales and marketing. I work for a lot of startups, so I'm the sales and the marketing.
Yes.
So I guess I'm sort of, jack of all trades in that sense. But you need to, marketing is there to, there's lots of definitions, of course, but marketing is there to grow a brand and also to ultimately help sell what it is that you sell your products and service. And then if you have a sales organization, the sales team are the people that are actually in front of customers. Now that information has to come, has to be communicated. You're as a salesperson, your interactions with customers and what you're learning in meetings is, I guess if you're in a B2B space, that needs to be aligned with the messaging that is going out as part of your marketing. One of the number one things for me is that your promise out in market, be that from a salesperson's mouth or a banner ad that goes across the internet, has to match the realities of your product, be that what's on your website or the product that people ultimately buy or the service that they engage in. Then there can't be that disconnect. And often when they're siloed departments, then it's easy for the messaging to not necessarily equal the feedback and the experience that that salespeople are getting. So I think no matter how your company is structured, having sales and marketing working as closely as possible and making sure that everyone's aligned is vital.
I think you're saying this is an integrity thing. We need to be saying consistent things the whole way through, and if we're not, we're not being integrous. And ultimately, if your marketing promises something your salespeople can't deliver, or your operations can't deliver, you're creating a lot of bad will. You're kind of wrecking your brand.
Exactly right, and that's why that's why the sort of having your strategy, creating that sort of commercial sales and marketing strategy up front, and having sales and marketing working together and crafting that is really important. And then when you start from a marketing point of view, when you start looking at effective channels, like which channels should you be investing your time and your effort in. How I go about that, I tend to look at the customer path to purchase, the sort of that purchase funnel, and then I work backwards. So I kind of go, okay, the destination, say your website. How does your website reflect your strategy? How is the user experience, the simplicity of your messaging, the ease of transaction? How easy is it for people to buy? The customer service, all of that needs to match all of those sort of lofty mission goals you would have as a strategy. And then from there, you kind of work backwards. You kind of go, well, okay, how do I then address those people who are actively in the market for what I'm selling? That's when you start looking at the detail of your SEO, your paid search, all of the your sort of inbound marketing or the content that's going to drive people back to your site. Then you kind of look at your audience and kind of go, okay, I've done all my persona work. I understand who I think my customers are. What's the ecosystem that they operate in? What's their world? And this goes back to the empathy thing. What's their life? What's a day in the life of this person? If I'm, forget where you work for a sec. If I'm a punter looking to buy this product, what am I going to do? Where do I hang out? Where do I get the advice? Where does that credibility come from? Where do the referrals come from? And just really nail that sort of path to purchase, and then just make sure that you are representing your brand in the best possible way in all of those steps, from your customer's point of view. Make sure that
Yeah,
you're there,
terrific.
and make sure that you're there effectively. But you got to do it from the customer's point of view, as you said, walking a mile in your customer's shoes, rather than your point of view, because then you can get blinded by how close you are to your product. You can fall in love with your own ideas, fall in love with your own brand. I've been
think
working
we,
on this campaign for months. This is the best thing ever. The customer doesn't care. They just want to know if the product, going back to what we we're saying, is helping me do that thing I need to do, helping me with my problem, and do I feel good and about myself for having owned it? Does it make me feel special?
yeah, I mean, you're talking about digital strategy being the first piece, the strategic piece being what is it we want to achieve, who is our customer that we're going to be talking to, what's the competitive landscape, then moving into tactics, what are the channels we're going to choose, and then execution, getting down to what keywords are we optimizing for, and what should we be posting on social. So, and
Exactly.
they've all got to work, right? If
They
you
do all
miss,
have to work together, and it's funny. And if you spend, as all of us in this sort of professional world do, spend too much time on platforms like LinkedIn, where we're just getting bombarded with new and shiny tactics that we need
yeah,
to know. Sometimes you can forget about those fundamentals of exactly what you said, of making sure that you've got a customer centric strategy, and you're building stuff that they actually want to buy,
yes,
and you're making it easy for them to buy it. That's the key. How can you make it as easy as possible for them to buy your product, and then interact with you from a customer service point of view? Just be that easy helpful company.
yes, I love this idea of a customer centric strategy. Um, you've worked in startups and you've worked in corporate. Strategically, I mean, we've got people listening to this that are in both, I would imagine. Strategically, I mean, tactically and execution wise, how would you say they're different? What do you do differently in those two different scenarios?
When you're working for corporate, when you're working for big organizations, often it is a lot more siloed. It just kind of has to be in a way, and they will have a very set a very set way of doing things, or a very set brand, and they need to be pretty consistent in terms of how they execute that. I've worked for a number of I've worked for the Australian offices for a number of big global organisations, whereas you have sort of a bit of tactical freedom to do your own thing, but you can't mess with the brand.
No.
That comes from up top. So you have to be respectful for that. Of that, I think that's got its pluses and minuses. Plus, because you can trade off a big established brand that's got the customers, that's done the work, and has that sort of strength of being big and being a leader in their field. At the same time, when you're a startup, your real challenge is that you're pretty much unknown in a sea of incumbents and much bigger branded organizations, but you have the opportunity to be nimble. You have the opportunity to kind of test and learn. You have the opportunity to, if something isn't working, you can go, you know what, we're changing this. Website's crap, we're going to change it. Don't like logo, we're going to change it, because you haven't or you're not established enough to really disrupt people in a negative way. Most people won't notice if you make a change, and if something's not working, then you
Yes,
should change.
yes. You're not causing brand damage by changing the color of your logo. It
Exactly
doesn't matter
right.
as
So,
much.
so I'm sort of living in this sort of double-edged sword
Yes.
career world, where I love the freedom. I love going back to the creativity thing. I love being able to create these new strategies and apply these learnings. But it's hard because you're small and you're unknown, and you've got to
Yeah, no,
fighting
yeah.
against the noise of of a million other companies like you and big incumbents that have more money, more people, more time, more customers.
And potentially 50 years worth of brand exposure. People just know you. So when you invite them to do business with you, they trust you. So the yes is easier.
And don't underestimate like we always talk, tech industry, and again, we're kind of in our bubble a little bit, but we always talk about we're a disruptor and disrupting this is fantastic, but don't underestimate the power of brands and the power of, like, loyalty is the wrong word, because I don't necessarily think people are loyal to brands themselves. They're loyal to their own habits, right? So somebody's been doing something for so long, it's hard to get them to change. It's like, with your mortgage and your bank, you're getting ripped off by one of the big banks. I'm the perfect example of this, and it took me about 4 years to bother to make a phone call to get a cheaper interest rate.
Yeah.
Human behavior, people don't change human behavior very often. The only time I think I've been lucky enough to be involved in an industry where that happened en masse is when I joined Pandora, and the music streaming service, when music streaming was really bursting into the mainstream in Australia in about 2013, because we were changing the way people consume music. And now it's streaming music, like streaming TV, is really the dominant force, or the dominant way of consuming media. So that was a bit of an exception, but they come along every couple of decades. I think it's really hard to get people to change something that they've always done. Doesn't mean we shouldn't try, because otherwise we wouldn't be in these startup worlds.
So one of the differences, I mean, the budget between startup and corporate budget's the obvious one, right? But would it be fair to say that customer or people has to be the center of the strategy, no matter the size of the business?
100%. I think the marketing fundamentals don't change. People need to be, and I think even more so, because when you're a startup, you need as many friends as you can get. You need people to help you. You don't have the budgets to just do huge always on ad campaigns. You throw enough money at something, you're gonna get a result in most cases. When you don't have those budgets, you need to be a little bit more strategic in how you approach it. And I have a philosophy, when I've sort of worked in marketing roles in startups, of how do you get 1 + 1 to equal 100? And what I mean by that is, how do you partner with individuals or organizations that will give you access to some of the hard work that they've done in terms of growing audiences and customers. So how do you find evangelists for your brand? I know, when I was at Jackster, which was a music credits website, our customers were people in the music industry, professionals in the music industry, and people like producers, music producers, and engineers working in studios. And those professional ecosystems are really close-knit. It's really hard to find those people and open up. They operate in this little sort of closed circuit. So we worked hard and our product was really servicing those people. So we found a whole bunch of engineers and producers in the music industry who ultimately loved what we were doing for them, and they were willing to then go and help us and become evangelists for our brand. And more important than getting a testimonial or you should use Jackster, it's fantastic, they on their own doing, opened up their really tight-knit social circles to us. They gave us access to their colleagues. They gave us access to people in their organizations, because there was an alignment of values. They were confident, and they were confident that what we were doing was for the best interests of them, their colleagues, and the industry. And that's why credibility within the industry that you're working in is incredibly important. And once you establish that credibility, then you're going to find people are really wanting to help you. happy to share their expertise, and they want you to become a success because you're all sort of fighting the same fight.
Can I pick up on your tactics comment before? It's just an observation. I wonder if you agree with me that one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is that they become tactically obsessed, and maybe it's if we do LinkedIn right, our business will blow up, or podcasts, or SEO, or we need to do or Chat GPT is probably we've got this tactic. And the focus is tactic. Most people I speak to are asking me for help with tactics, where really we should be people obsessed, and that's going to select tactics, but we should really be starting with people.
Yeah, I think people and a strategy for people. You have to. The first thing I sort of do when I look at a strategy, I've done a lot of go-to-market strategies for new businesses and startups. Is you have to kind of go, okay, what is my product or service? What is the thing that I sell, and who is the market for that for that product? Who is actually going to buy it? Who are the potential customers? And then you go around and you group them, and you kind of go, okay, I'm going to group them in a variety of different ways. I'm going to group them into personas, the type of person that they are. Yep. If it's the industries that they work in, if it's B2B, where they live, the different markets, all of those different areas that you would group, and from a tactical point of view is where you might target in your market. And then once you sort of have got a good feel, you have to kind of do the maths and go, okay, what is the size of the opportunity here? How big is my potential business if I can get a certain market share of these particular people? And then you have to kind of go, okay, what's my unique selling proposition? What is my, to each of these individual groups? Like, how is what I'm doing going to make life easier or better for those particular groups? And then that will guide your messaging for those particular groups.
Yes.
And then you kind of go, okay, next, where do I find those people? What are the different channels, or what are the different areas? Where do I find them? And then once you kind of worked out your sort of engagement strategy with there, then you can talk about tactics. Tactics is the how. How do I do it?
Yes.
What do I employ? Am I going to do it through ads? Am I going to do it through LinkedIn? Am I going to create video? All of those things.
Yes.
But that's it's the most fun bit, because that's where you can have your creative executions and work out what you're going to do. But unless you have got a clear handle on the who's and the whys, then you're missing a beat.
And I wonder if what I observe often is we're going the other way. We choose the tactic and then figure out who we're going to speak to on using that tactic, instead of the other way around. And I think that trips people up. Most businesses I speak to are struggling with their marketing. What advice would you give other marketers or business owners out there who are struggling?
Well, look, as has been the sort of the big theme of the of the conversation today is, put yourself in the shoes of your customers. Make everything you do customer centric. They don't care about your brand or your ads as much as you think they do.
No.
They care about their lives and how your product or service can make their lives better. Make it about them. Go and speak to them. If you're in doubt, ask them. People are really happy to talk about themselves, right? Find people, be it friends and family if you're a small business, and go from there. Just work it out. Do the work in the strategy first, and then find people, within those target groups, and get an understanding of what they do. So, number one thing is simplify your proposition. Especially if you're in the B2B space, and get rid of the jargon. I always say to, because I've always worked in digital, we always have this running joke, but I think there's a lot of truth in it, is how to explain what you do to your mum. Make it.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah. So your mum understands first time. You have to articulate it simply. People don't care about jargon. They want to get it in one sentence. Has to be clear as day. And until you can do that, I wouldn't be putting any messaging out into the wild. You know, as I sort of mentioned before, you know, find those sort of evangelists, find people that share your values, ask for help. You know, people are happy to share their expertise. You know, if you've got a skills gap, ask for help. Find help. You know, if you've got the funds, employ help. That's, you know, where an agency comes in. If there's, you know, something that you're not doing well, I think if you're, you know, say for instance, you're trying to write content or you're trying to create your own ads in things like Canva, which are fantastic. By all means, have a crack, but then compare it to the best work of your best competitors. And if it's not as good, get help. If it's better, fantastic. You've got a great skill and all power to you. But I think, yeah, don't be so proud that you can't, you know, outsource, you know, your skills gaps. Focus on what you're really strong at.
Well, I mean, I just want to pick up on that jargon thing because I really have an allergic reaction to jargon. Someone comes to talk to us about digital marketing and they are, I don't know, they're a plumbing company. They don't know our industry. Like, they've got their own jargon. They've got jargon in their industry. We've got jargon in ours. You've got to put it in the bin. It's a massive barrier to communication. But
use the jargon your customers use if you're going to use jargon, right?
Yeah. If you know it, but yeah.
Or just say things. It just comes down to simplicity. Say it simply. Say it just using really simple words. Don't use, you know, don't try to be too clever and use, you know, full of adjectives and things like that. Just take the Ernest Hemingway approach and just say it how it is. Yes,
there is a tendency amongst creatives to be poetic and inspiring and witty and confusing, right? Actually, your own cleverness gets in your way. You did hint there on around using an internal marketing team versus an agency or an external marketing team. What are your thoughts on that? When and where?
Look, I think it's really important to find a balance between, you know, having people that are close to the day-to-day operations of your business. So in other words, people that work in your company, and people that can give a, you know, fresh outside perspective on things. Sometimes you know, you can be too close to be able to see the forest through the trees. So, and as I mentioned before, you fall in love with your own ideas and your own products. You need somebody, you know, that, and this is when you are looking for someone external, someone that you can have a good enough relationship with, that's no bullshit, that can actually, you know, not just stroke your ego. You don't want yes men or yes people in an agency. You know, that fresh sort of perspective and experience is really important. I think you should outsource to an agency when there's skills gaps, as I said, and you know, if it's not as good as your competitors, really sort of seek that help. But on the flip side, to me, there are certain things that should always stay in-house. And that is, and I think it's worth investing in people and resources for that. And to me, that's when anything that requires direct interaction with your customers, be that through sort of, you know, customer service or engagement with your site, or even social media, you know, social media posts and engagement. I'm a firm believer of keeping those in-house if possible, if you've got those resources, because you've got that day-to-day interaction. Outsourcing, you know, customer interaction, I think just creates a gap, and it creates a, you know, can potentially create a sort of, you know, Chinese whisper scenario where you're not being fast or nimble enough to react because somebody else is doing it. And when I was at Jaxter, the first thing that we did was, you know, we had to look at our agencies, and, you know, we took the social media in-house so we could control that narrative a little bit more. Not everyone would agree, but that's just my personal view. Whereas I think an agency has been very, very helpful in terms of a lot of the tactical marketing, the creative, you know, the creative executions, you know, and being able to take, you know, get that new strategic perspective in place that can add something to what you already have. And but also, as an organisation gets bigger, there is a tendency to use more agencies and multiple agencies and bigger agencies. And I think you just have to be a little bit conscious of the second you start having multiple agencies, that creates even more silos, as multiple agencies tend to compete, and it can lead to
Well,
a breakdown in communication.
it's
For me,
complexity.
complexity, the less moving parts, the better. And even
Yeah.
with a single agency, be aware when you have the first meeting with the agency and there's 12 people in the meeting from the agency side. You often don't need an army of people, because firstly, I guess the costs can really mount. The more people doing things, the more the more expenses you have with a campaign, but also the you know becomes a bit more of a sort of committee on decisions, I think. But again, it's just personal preference.
Yes. I guess the flip side is that potentially you need a range of experts with deep knowledge in specific things, but it's just got to be managed through an account manager or something. That those people have got to be managed to all align with you.
Exactly. And yeah, look, I was more alluding, to that sort of communication as well. It's just, making sure that you've got as fewer, points of contact as possible. Because often what I found is that it can be, if there's multiple people reporting, then often things can fall, because one person might think it's the other person's responsibility to do a certain task. It's very difficult to have effective project management when there's lots of people, involved in the process. Or I could just be a terrible project manager.
No, project managing clients is an important part of the relationship. Can I ask about your music? You present a music show. Is this, you've obviously been involved in the music industry. Is that a creative outlet for you, or is that something you really enjoy doing? I know this is slightly off topic, but it's just out of curiosity.
Yeah, so look, music, it's definitely a creative pursuit. I've been a record collector, vinyl record collector,
Oh, nice.
community radio host for the last 20 years. I'll turn my camera and you can see the old.
Oh gosh, excellent.
Yeah. So that has been, it's been my creative pursuit. Community radio as a medium is fantastic, because there's no commercial pressures to play a certain type of music or for a certain type of audience. I've got 2 hours of complete freedom to play whatever I like.
Yeah, cool.
And
On community radio.
For a creative person who loves his music, that is that is really, really important. So look, it's an outlet for me. I'm now doing a national sort of show on the ABC as well, and what I love about it is my whole premise in that is trying to take music that's sort of relatively obscure and sort of known in normally in just a particular obscure sort of genre circle, and try to make it as accessible and mainstream as possible. And and I also think that this is something that is worth pointing out as we kind of go into this AI era, this era of algorithms that we find ourselves in. I've worked for for 2 music streaming companies that are algorithmically driven, but the AI is never going to match the nuances of, I guess, expertise and passion, because AI is not, it doesn't think, it processes data. So, the individual nuances of why somebody would recommend something based on previous experiences emotional experiences they've had with music, is incredibly important. And that's what resonates with audiences as, as music is so personal and emotional for pretty much everyone. So despite working in digital and in this sort of AI space, this is sort of, this last bastion of, of sort of human controlled creativity, and I hold it really dear. And look, I've been lucky enough to combine my work for a number of years with music, obviously in the music streaming, and then Jackster for a couple of years. But first and foremost, it's a hobby. It'll remain a hobby for life. If I make any money out of it, then great.
Yeah, that's awesome. I guess, unsurprisingly, I take a people first approach to AI and ChatGPT, and that is, it helps people. It's a tool that people use. I don't think it's replacing anybody in a hurry. It adds efficiencies. It helps, but
and also it makes you got to be careful. And it's interesting. One of my friends has a content marketing copywriting agency, and he just wrote a really interesting article on ChatGPT. He worked with ChatGPT to see if he could write a novel with it, and it's been going on for months now. It's really fascinating. But what ChatGPT and other similar services do is that they can output information really, really easily. It's really easy. You can write 1,000 words on this. But the trouble is, because it's so easily accessible, and the barrier, it's a bit like what we were talking about earlier with the influencers, the barrier of entry is so small, then it becomes same really quickly. It is going to create a lot of content that looks and sounds and feels and tastes very similar to everybody else that's using that tool. Because what it's missing is the craft and the art that true writers, for instance, put into their work. And there's a lot of discussion about how this sort of AI-driven content is going to make a lot of the internet full of a lot of as I said, same content that does the job but is pretty uninspiring. But that will just make good writers even more in demand, because their craft is that much higher.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't want to be churning out basic real estate descriptions, that sort of thing. Like, sure, that sort of thing is going to get automated, but the craft of writing, like the craft of music, where it really pulls on heartstrings and it connects to people, I don't see machines taking that over anytime soon. For the people that is valuable to, for the people that just want information, they want facts, and yeah, sure. So I think probably the market for quality is going to reduce, unfortunately, but it's going to become more valuable.
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree more. I guess if you want to create 100 articles for your SEO, 100 blogs for your website, you could jump on ChatGPT and do 100 blogs in roughly 100 minutes. Build them all out and away you go. But that's going to be the 100 most bland, beige content, boilerplate content you ever read.
And it's funny, like I'm in the process of, I've just bought a domain name, in the process of creating a bit of a blog myself for the first time. And it's amazing, in every topic under the sun, the amount of people that are trying to gain SEO and just, the 10 most important, blah, blah, blah. Like there's, generic content. And it was funny, I'm looking to book a holiday to Europe, looking at accommodation. Where we're wanting to go was, these must-have apartments you should stay. And it was obvious it was written by AI and not even checked, because the description was, it is 35 kilometers away from this train station. Like, whereas it's just not, that's not compelling if I'm wanting to go to a small town. Like it's
so I guess ChatGPT came out in November, so we're only a few months in. People are going to smell it. They jump on and read, they go, no, they click back, because it's just totally bland content, boilerplate. And Google's algorithm, another AI, is going to push it down the results.
Exactly, it'll be a turf war between Microsoft and Google, and preferencing their own AI in-house AI tools. But also, if we go back to what we're talking about customers, right, and the importance of making everything customers first. Like, surely your marketing is not just about efficiencies. How quickly can you churn out customers? No. Surely it's about the experience your customer gets when engaging with your content. Surely you want that to be as well written as possible.
Yep.
That's my take.
Well, 100%. And our content team is using it as a tool to help and generate ideas and show what possibly could be and prevent, white page fever. But otherwise, it's a lot of handwritten information.
And just to, last thing I'll say, because we've sort of gone down this rabbit hole a bit, but what I find when I've used it, and just generally, I find it a lot more time consuming and a lot harder to edit a piece of work than to write it.
Yeah.
To change somebody else's work, whereas ultimately ChatGPT is somebody else's work. It's the AI's work, and you're having to then try to adjust it into your personal style. Why not just write your personal style and create your own expertise brand in terms of your writing skill? Surely, as a writer and a marketer, that's what you want.
Yeah,
but again,
precisely.
That's my opinion.
No, I agree. A last question: if you could speak to yourself 10 years ago, or maybe even 20 years ago, what advice would you speak to your younger self?
It's a really good question. Look, I think I'd, benefit of hindsight, right? But I think I'd want to be braver.
Right.
To be honest, I think I was, I guess, under the impression that you worked for companies and then you, did everything you could working for, a corporation or an organization, and then, everything was really, opportunities were given to you through, potential employment with a potential organization or corporation. I wish I was braver to, capitalize on some of my own ideas, do some stuff on my own, create my own businesses, take a few more risks. So, and I think, it's that sort of the security versus the reward. It's that whole risk adverse threshold. So, look, I try not to believe in having regrets, but I think if I had my time again, I probably would have taken a few more risks for me, in terms of trying to set up my own thing, which I'm in the process of trying to do now. So,
Well, I love that. I love that advice. I think that really resonates. You're more capable, and there's more opportunity than you probably believe there is. So have a crack.
Yeah, and also find more mentors. Don't be afraid to. I've been lucky enough to have some great mentors in my time, but other times I've missed those opportunities. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Ask somebody's story. You've done really well. I admire what you've done. I'd love to learn how you did it because I'd like to do something similar. And 9 out of 10 times that, if you're genuine, they would be really, really happy to help.
I think if I was to speak to my 10 years ago to myself, it would be around that, our mentors and coaches, finding those people. In life, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to make all the mistakes. Someone else has already made them. If you ask them the question, you can save yourself the headaches.
Yeah. And then going back to my first point about being braver, it's a lot easier to be braver when you've got someone cheering you on.
Yeah.
When it's you, kind of on your own going, oh, should I do this? Should I do that? Internalizing it. There's a million voices telling you why something will fail. When you've got someone who you respect and has been through it before, they can guide you on how you can make it work. And that creates a real mindset difference in how you approach things.
Well, I think that's a great place to finish. Thank you so much for joining us today, Shaun.
Thanks, James. Sorry if I ranted on too much, but it's been a pleasure.
No, it's terrific. Lots of insights and great learnings. Appreciate it. Well, I hope you've found today's episode informative. I know that most businesses struggle with their digital marketing, and that's why we've developed a process over the past 10 years to put together robust and holistic digital marketing strategies to help your businesses grow. If you need help with your digital marketing, just Google The Online Co, click the red button to book a quick chat. We'd love to speak to you and see how we can help. Take care, everyone. Bye.